the Maryland Institute. I had a Tiffany Foundation fellowship, so I had some money, and I moved to Philly. It was sort of a compromise. I didn't want to stay in Baltimore, and I didn't want to move to New York. Philly was close enough to both, so I moved here. That was in 1973, and been here ever since. We moved to Northern Liberties in 1977 when we bought this building, and my studio and our living space have been in this building since then. I think the process to decide what to paint is essentially in that title, Random Thoughts, whatever comes to mind. And I think between the fact that it's me making the image, there's going to be similarity from whatever the ideas are because of my hand making it. My work is sort of all over the place because of the different materials I've used and the different approaches to making the images that I've used. And I've always tried to somehow consolidate this sort of varied way of working and thinking, and it struck me on this group of paintings that I was able to come up with this modular idea of using panels that fit together to create the narrative, where they're sort of separate in their conception, but I want them to be fit together because I like contrast. I always feel that the single panel for me is naked. It just feels like it's lost by itself. It's like it's out of the population of the rest of the panels. So when I put something else on top of it or next to it, it starts feeling more complete. That it enabled me to use a variety of images, of techniques, and just say, because I'm the artist, I'm putting them together and they work together. And once I decided to do that, then in terms of the practical, I could see that since people respond to separate parts of these combinations, that I didn't have any problem with if somebody, in the sense of wanting to buy one, wants to buy a piece from a piece, that's fine with me. I've always preferred working in a large scale, and when I first decided to be a painter, to be an artist, the idea of confronting a canvas, at the time it was canvas, these happen to be on doors, but the idea of something as big as me, that in terms of the illusions of space that I was painting, that I could actually, if I could Alice in Wonderland sort of step into it, that I could physically do it. I came up with the use of the tar in my paintings from my experiences as a developer, a construction person. I've done properties around the neighborhood. I grew up in a family of contractors, and materials that we've used on the job sort of started imposing themselves on me in the studio. So the paper was painted on in reverse on the back, then laid down over tar and rolled out with a roller, squeeze out the excess tar, and then over a course of a day or two, the tar would bleed through the paper, and you'd get this image in the positive. And also for me, because I'm so obsessive with this kind of process of painting, that it breaks it down a little bit, becomes a little rougher, less technically exacting. So it's been a nice sort of break for me in terms of loosening up. I can't speak to the art scene necessarily anywhere because I don't feel that much a part of it. I have other things, I guess, that I'm involved with. I'm a community activist in the neighborhood, involved with zoning issues and license and inspections issues and development issues in regard to our waterfront. It's a difficult balancing act sometimes. How do you get the realism and the bottom line of dealing with people that are building $750 million condo buildings with going in the studio and doing whatever the hell you want to do? Because I live here and I've been here for 30 years, then what happens day to day is part of how I view the world, and how I view the world is how I lived in Northern Liberties. I was here when we had these lunatics, that owned properties that were falling down. This was Northern Liberties back in the 70s. There was a guy that used to walk around with a football helmet and a shopping cart, and he would set fires to buildings. Mr. Kitchens was his name. There was Mr. Big Balls, who had this sort of some kind of distortion in his scrotum, and he'd stand in the doorway on 2nd Street with his pants down around his ankles, throwing food out the door. There were people running around shooting at one another, like a Wild West show. Everything was industrial when I got here. We were the illegals living in commercial buildings. Now we're like at the pinnacle of development. Everything is under construction. you walk out the door here and you've got a high rise in the corner, another high rise down there, house going up at the corner here. Maybe that relates to the idea that I'm doing these multiple images, and that change has something to do with the idea of putting things, disparate images together. And as you see in the neighborhood, there's like a house next to a warehouse, next to a high-rise, next to a condo, next to a commercial space. It's all in flux. I tend to think about practical realities in the world, so it needs to be wrapped onto something that has narrative, practical implications. So socio-political, in the past I've done emotional, subject matter, things to do with just human nature in all its ramifications. I can't avoid that. It's part of my psyche.